Hello, everyone. It's Francis Widdowson here. I would like to do a video today on Aaron Pete because Aaron Pete just posted something on Twitter, or what's now called X, which I think is very, very important. And I am a huge supporter of Aaron Pete. I think that it's incredible that he has risen up to this position of leadership because we really need to be having the discussions that Aaron Pete is facilitating. And so I want to do everything that I can to help him. And the reason why I'm talking about Aaron Pete today is because he posted on X a commentary in reaction to Joely Viveiros. So, for people who are unaware of Joely Viveiros, we had a bit of a rumble. I guess it was a month or two ago. I can't remember how long ago, when I didn't even know who Joely Viveiros was at the time. And she is the director of the First Nations House of Learning, which is an embarrassing activist oriented center at the University of British Columbia. So we have all these things now that exist in all universities across Canada, whether it's the Aniskum Center at Mount Royal University or the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation at the University of Manitoba or the First Nations House of Learning at the University of British Columbia. And what they do is they fill these entities with a whole bunch of activists, and then those activists go out and try to infuse the institution itself, the academic institution itself, with advocacy oriented initiatives. And initially, it works okay because it's kind of separate from the academic mandate. But as we're seeing with all of these entities, they're interfering with the ability to pursue the truth at universities. Anyway, Joely went on my Twitter account, made some nasty comments to me. And when I tried to just, in a civil manner, respond to her, she blocked me on Twitter. And then she had this huge meltdown because Jonathan Kay was interacting with her and wouldn't stop basically mocking her stupidity. And she has no one challenges her, so she cannot take criticism at all. She doesn't change her mind. She doesn't recalibrate anything she says according to evidence. So she is just a serious bad actor at the First Nations House of Learning. Anyway, Joely took it upon herself to respond to Aaron Pete, I guess it was an hour or two ago, saying, Aaron, it seems you joined their cult on Indigenous graves. Unfortunately, it's difficult for you to back out now. And I'm just looking at my computer as to what she's referring to in terms of this reply. And I don't, it's something about Billboard Chris. Did you work your whole life to buy that $2 million home near Vancouver? Too bad your home is no longer yours. Um, anyway, so Aaron Pete is contesting Billboard Chris's interpretation of the court position. Anyway, Joely responds with this, you joined their cult on Indigenous graves, and now it's difficult for you to back out. So, it's kind of a snide comment that she's making there. Anyway, Aaron Pete says in response to this, very, very not name calling it Joely, not getting upset at her, but just says, is trying to clarify what he's been doing, which I highly commend, because we're trying to break down what's called epistemic tribalism, where either you're arguing that the unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, and you've got to sign up for a whole bunch of other things, and you don't speak to people who have opposing opinions. So he says, Aaron Pete, in response to Joely's nasty comment, this is what makes nuanced, balanced discussions challenging. On the right, you have people making racist remarks about Indigenous people On the other side, you have people who shame you for speaking with those you may disagree with. I don't think Candace Malcolm, Nigel Biggar, Francis Widdowson, or John Kay would say I'm in their group, and I don't know if they're all in the same group in terms of their perspectives. We have to be able to speak with those we disagree with. That is fundamental. I'm not on a team and I'm not in a cult. So he's trying to say this is this kind of open inquiry kind of approach where in order to pursue the truth, you have to consider opposing points of view, and maybe you will challenge your own perspective a little bit about this when you do hear opposing views. And I'm a big fan of this approach. And I am trying to bring Peter Boghossian's method of spectrum street epistemology to do this. And Aaron Pete and I actually did do some spectrum street epistemology on his show when he interviewed me. And it turned out that he said he was between slightly agree and agree in response to the claim the remains of 215 children are buried in the Kamloops apple orchard. So he's on the agree side of the spectrum street epistemology, Mats, and I'm on the strongly disagree side. So that is a difference that Aaron Pete and I had, and we discussed that on his program. And I'm not sure if either of us convinced, made us move in terms of our certainty on the matter, but we were able to sort of trace out the terrain which exists in terms of a couple of people's different opinions on this matter. And so I think that that's a difference. So when we're talking about, when Aaron Pete is talking about groups, so I'm not in Aaron Pete's group on the matter of the remains of 215 children being buried in the Kamloops apple orchard, because he seems to think that's more likely than me. And in terms of discussing the evidence, we can move maybe closer together on this or not, but we seem to have quite a different opinion on that. However, we are in the same group in terms of our position that we should be able to openly discuss the issue of the unmarked graves. And that puts Aaron Pete in a different group, in the same group as me, and the same group as Candace Malcolm, the same group as Nigel Biggar, the same group as Jonathan Kay. I'm pretty sure all of those people would also agree that we should be able to openly discuss this. Joely Viveiros, on the other hand, I don't know what her position is on this, but she seems to be quite authoritarian in terms of her arguments. And at one point, I have a video of her saying that Indigenous people have an inherent right to feel comfortable at universities. And so if you're going to have that argument that there's some kind of inherent right to feel comfortable, obviously you're going to be very opposed to things like spectrum street epistemology. So I think that Joely Viveiros, although I can't really say for sure, I would assume she would want to criminalize residential school denialism. She would want to have all sorts of restrictions on what you can say at a university, because she thinks that Indigenous people should feel comfortable all the time. And that is an absurd position for someone in a university to be putting forward. And that's why the University of British Columbia is in serious trouble with respect to Aboriginal policy, discussions of Aboriginal policy. And we have, in fact, Andrew Martindale, who is an archaeologist at University of British Columbia, who's doing all sorts of unethical things with respect to the Cooper Island supposed unmarked graves, which we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. It's likely that those are in a cemetery or are just anomalies on the GPR. And until we excavate, we won't know what lies beneath the soil at Cooper Island. But if we're looking at a cemetery, obviously there's going to be remains in that cemetery. So Andrew Martindale is confusing a whole bunch of issues. And the reason why he gets away with that is because we have people like Joely Viveiros, who seem to have a lot of influence at the University of British Columbia. So therefore, I've kind of identified in talking about Aaron Pete's comments, two kinds of areas. One, we're on the same in the same group with respect to open inquiry. This puts us in opposition to Joely Viveiros, probably. Then we have the unmarked graves issue at Kamloops as to whether there's remains there, and Pete is thinks that there are, which I think is I totally disagree with that. I think that the evidence for that is very, very weak and doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because we had a RCMP investigation in the 1990s by a task force, and no one at that time came forward and made any comments about missing children or unmarked or clandestine burials. And it wasn't like it was an RCMP completely controlled thing. They had Charlene Bello, who was helping be a liaison to make Aboriginal people feel comfortable coming forward. And they had some sexual abuse claims that they investigated and found people had been guilty of that crime, but there was nothing on the. So how did that change between 1990s and 2021? And it's because we had Sarah Bollier, an incompetent GPR operator who's a conflict anthropologist. She did not do the GPR in the way that a geoscientist would. And we had this huge blow up, which was completely unnecessary if it had been done scientifically. Anyway, this is all the problems within archaeology and anthropology at the university system. And then we have the final area where, whether who's in what group, who's in what camp, and this is political ideology. And this is something that people do not understand, particularly about me, is that I'm a socialist of the Orwellian variety. So I think there's problems with capitalism, but I also think that human freedom is incredibly important. And Orwell, that was the kind of terrain that he staked out, because he was very aware of regimes like the Soviet Union and Mao's China, where you have terrible kinds of oppression. It happens they're trying to bring about a new regime, but they trample over everyone's ability to discuss things. And of course, once you start doing that, you're going to have terrible mistakes being made. And of course, we have a number of terrible mistakes and authoritarian consequences of that. So I am different than all of these: Candace Malcolm, Nigel Bigger, and John Kay. And I don't know what Aaron Pete's political leanings are, so I can't comment. But it's my understanding that Candace Malcolm is a conservative and also religious. Nigel Bigger as well is conservative, I believe, and religious. John Kay, he seems to be a libertarian, and in some ways he's classical liberal. And I listened to him talk about things like medical assistance in dying. He thinks you should have the right to do that. And he seems to probably be an atheist. I know he says he's a lapsed Jew, but you often have Jewish people who don't believe in God. Their religion is perhaps tribally based, which relies upon a covenant with God and the land of Israel, maybe. So I don't know, but I have no idea what his religious beliefs are. So we are all in different camps and on different teams with respect to political ideology, I think. And that's got to be understood, is that the unmarked graves claims are not matters of political ideology. They're matters of fact. And anyone who is concerned about pursuing the truth, regardless of what your political ideology is, you should not really be worrying about what camp, you're in and these kinds of things. It's, everyone who values academic integrity. And I don't think that aligns with any ideology. So in summary, in response to Aaron Pete's comments, first of all, thank you so much for standing up for open inquiry and having the courage to sit down with people who disagree with you. I know that cannot have been easy, because I'm sure you're taking flack from all sides, as you have mentioned. But I think at the same time, we need to clarify the lines of disagreement. And I hope that this video has been helpful in trying to map that out. And it would be great if we could get all of us together and maybe some other brave Aboriginal people who want to discuss this issue in some kind of event, because I think that that would be very, very interesting. Perhaps we can do it on the 5th anniversary of the false claim that was made by the Kamloops Indian Band that the remains of 215 children have been confirmed at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. Let's, on the 5th anniversary, have an open discussion with all the variety of viewpoints on a number of levels about this particular case. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great day.